So good day everyone. Our topic is known as computer hardware 1. So our course code is EEC 117 week 1. So we are now on the second slide, which is evolution of computer from ENIAC to present technology. So ENIAC, the acronyms of this ENIAC is known as Electronic Numerical Integrator and Computer. Was the first programmable electronic digital computer, was completed in 1945. Other computers had some of these features, but ENIAC, which is Electronic Numerical Integrator and Computer, was the first to have them all. It was turning complete and able to solve a large class of numerical problems through reprogramming. So back then, most systems we have, they don't have the ability or capacity of programming language, but with the help of this architecture, which is known as ENIAC, Electronical Numerical Integrator Computer, they were the first people to provide a system that will have access for programming like HTML, Java, Python, and so on. So ENIAC was a groundbreaking computer that laid foundation for modern computer. So they were the first computer that laid the foundation of those aspects regard to programming. If not, it could have been difficult for the new generation computer to have that idea. Electronic components. The ENIAC was the first computer to use electronic components like resistor, inductors, capacitors, and so on. So we are now on third slide, which is diagram of ENIAC computer. As we can see, here is the diagram, which is very large. You can see how the heat sink it was. It is very big. It's even more than desktop and laptop. If you have to compare them, it is bigger than it. They also have tires attached to them so that you can move them from one point to another. We can see their cables, how big they are. So we can see the electronics chips on them. They are very huge. So this is the ENIAC computers diagram. Look at the ENIAC programming challenges. Like the first one, programmability. The ENIAC was the first general purpose electronic computer that could be programmed. You can program it with different devices. So data storage and retrieval. The ENIAC was the first computer to store and retrieve data electronically. You can retrieve the data electronically. Without electronically, like electric current, you won't be able to retrieve any data. Mapping a problem onto the machine was complex and usually took weeks. So once it encountered an issue or problem, you have to spend weeks before you can rectify them. Creating and verifying the physical connection was complicated and tedious due to the complexity of those wires and items on the board, which they are very huge. You can find it more difficult for you to have access to solve the particular issue, which is the physical connections. Now the programming, the machine require shutting it down for days to reconfigure its wires. So before you be able to reconfigure it have to take you some days so that it can rise from its booting. Not as now the system we normally use, once it put a little bit it can continue to work, but with the help of the previous one, which is the ENIAC devices, you have to spend some weeks before the wire will be able to be reconfigured or the system should boot. So the ENIAC development lead to many improvements in computer. So the first one, which is smaller, more compactable and more affordable computer, vacuum tubes to transistor, integrated circuit to microprocessor, computing network. The first one, which is known as the smaller, more compactable and more affordable computers. Other computers have picked the challenges of creating a system which will be very small and will have a more capacity and ability to function And then let's look at the vacuum tubes to transistor. Vacuum tubes technology are the era whereby a computer are very huge. The computers require a air condition so that they will be able to manage the heat of the central processing unit due to the size of the system, but they now transgress to transistors level, which the system is not that bigger than the previous one. So the integrated circuit to microprocessor are the current system we normally use, which we will be able to take them to wherever we intended to take them to. It is so flexible and not that heavy. So computing networks, so most computers have provided access of networks so that we will be able to have access to internet via port or Wi-Fi. So the port regards to the process of connecting our cables into it via Wi-Fi is a process of connecting our data through wireless. So the developments of ENIAC. The first one, which is smaller and more capable and more affordable computers. The ENIAC success inspired on others to build improved computers which became smaller, faster and cheaper over time. So it has become challenge for the other architectures, so they have to provide a computer that is more smaller and has the features that individual will prefer to use. So vacuum tubes to transistor. The ENIAC uses vacuum tubes which were eventually replaced by the transistor. Back then people prefer vacuum tube because it is the only device on ground, but now the inventory of this transistor have made individual to divert from that vacuum tube to transistors. So let's look at the integrated circuit. The integrated circuit to microprocessor. The integrated circuit perfect the way for the microprocessor system so that they are designed at a very small rate of a system. They are not that big. The vacuum tube technology is a process where the systems are wider, but the transistor to microprocessor are the systems which are very mini in size due to the architecture designs. So we are going to look at the technology used in ENIAC. With more than 17,000 vacuum tubes, 70,000 resistors, 10,000 capacitors, 6,000 switches and 1,500 relays, it was easily the most complex electronic system. Therefore, built ENIAC ran continuously in part of intent tube life, also generating 174 kilowatts of heat and require its own air conditioning system due to the huge capacity of those components. You can't have a processor fan on this. That is why they generate an air condition on a very small, a very high air condition that will provide an air that will sustain those electronics components, because they easily get heat because they are much. Let's look at the ring counters. The ENIAC uses ring counters to store digital and perform arithmetic. The ring counters contact pulses to perform arithmetic operations. So in our normal systems, we normally use arithmetic and logic unit for calculation aspect, but regard to the ENIAC technology, they uses ring counters. It provide and create access to work with the help of mathematical symbols like addition, multiplication, division and so on. So air condition, the ENIAC generate a lot of heat and require its own air conditioning system. So regard to the system, without this air condition mounted on this room, your device, which is ENIAC device, will not be able to function because the heat will be very high and the person on the room might end up be harmed due to the heat, because it is not feasible. We have to keep them on room. They can't provide case for that back then. So let's look at plug boards. Is used for shutting down the computer for this. So if you intended to shut down the system, you have to plug the boards on the outlet before it will be able to be possible. So we are going to look at the subunits of motherboard. The main subunit of a computer motherboard include the CPU, central processing unit, RAM, which is random access memory, chipset, north bridge and south bridge, basic input output system, which is BIOS, and expansion slots, various connectors. They all work together to facilitate communication between different components, T655 of the computer system. So as we can see the diagram on the systems, so we can see this part, they serve as the north bridge. Like this port are the port, the first green port and black are the port for the RAM, which is the random access memory for the memory operation. This chip where there is yellow space, which is the processor, that is where the processor is located, and the processor also has a processor fan. If you are to open the chip, you will be able to see it. So we can see our different ports on it. We can see the first 4 ports, which are known as the USB port. We can use them to transfer information or files between systems to phone. So we can see our south bridge, where other cable will be able to embed it, or where other cable will be able to insert on, and so on. Subunits of motherboard. We have the central processing unit, is the brain of the computer, responsible for processing instructions into the computer. Then we have the RAM, which is random access memory, temporary storage for data currently being used by the CPU. Chipset acts as an interface between the CPU, RAM and other components on the motherboard. Then BIOS, which is basic input output system, firmware that are initialized the computer when it starts up. Those firmware are protection of systems, whereby they attack viruses on the system. They are manufactured when the system are designed. Then expansion slots allow for additional components like graphics card or network cards to be added to the system. Expansion slots are space that they created on the system that will be able to attach external devices on them. Then, which is subunit of motherboard, we have the north bridge. A north bridge is a chip on a computer's motherboard that connects the processor to other components such as the memory, graphics card and peripherals. So as we can see, the first diagram refers to the north bridge. So let's look at the south bridge. The south bridge is a component of on a computer's motherboard that manage the input output. So the acronym of input and output is 1 or 0. Functions of the computer and other peripheral devices. So once we heard of peripheral devices, they are devices that can be attached to the computer externally, such as USB port, audio port and serial port. It coordinates and controls the flow of data between the different components of the system. Peripheral devices. A peripheral device is a device that can be attached to the computer externally. Peripheral device is a hardware component that connect to computer to add functionality without being a core part of the computer. So those peripheral devices, they are not core components of computer, but rather they are electronic devices that has their different functions on a computer. Let me give a scenario with a mouse or keyboard. So those are also devices, but they stand on their own, or printer, but they have their different functions. Once you connect a printer with your system, definitely you are going to have an output of hard copy. Then once you try to input your mouse, you will be able to navigate with the mouse and visualize on your system the movement of that mouse from one point to another. So that's the function of those aspects. They are peripheral devices. They are external devices attached to the system. So peripheral device can be input device or output devices, or both. Input devices send information to the computer, such as keyboard, mouse, scanner, microphone, or webcam. So output devices receive information from the computer and output it, such as a display screen or printer. So slide 12, computer drives.